You might have ADHD, you might have a high IQ, you might have both, you might be masking one with the other. Here's why it's so confusing. And here's some things that come along with having a high IQ. You appear not to be listening to a person because the conversation is just boring and you're thinking about something else. You can get into really intense focus when you're trying to do something. You're also super creative about the ideas and things you come up with because you're thinking about things all the time. You could be highly energetic. You could get to the point to where things that are too easy are just not motivating you to actually do that thing anymore. You might overthink and go into perfectionism because you're really analyzing the thing that you're trying to do. You might interrupt people while they're talking because you've already figured out where they're going with the conversation. You might forget things just because you've already used the information and you just don't need it anymore. So you're gonna go ahead and get rid of it so you can actually take in some new information for the thing that you're trying to do now. And here's some things about ADHD. You might look like you're not paying attention to a conversation because you just got distracted by something else in your location and that has your attention. You might get into super intense focus called hyperfocus. You're really curious about everything around it because you're trying to find something interesting, and so your interests switch all the time. And so now you're curious about everything. You might be creative. You might have a lot of energy all the time, fidgeting all the time, having to move a lot around all the time. You might be an outside the box thinker and brainstorm ideas really fast, really quickly. And maybe overthink things. Maybe everything has to be perfect before you move on to the next thing, which is perfectionism. Maybe interrupt people just because you're impulsive and want to get that point that's in your head out, but you don't want to wait your turn. And so all the things from having a high IQ and all the things from having ADHD are really similar. And then if you have ADHD and a high IQ, that means these things are going to overlap. It's going to be really hard to tell which one that you have. And here's something Dr. Thomas Brown said. ADHD has nothing to do with how smart a person is. People with ADHD can be gifted, average, below average in IQ, and IQ has zero impact on whether ADHD exists. And I know you've heard this before. You're intelligent, you did well in school, you can't possibly have ADHD. Well, that's just not true. And here's where people get confused. Things that come along with having ADHD and things that come along with having a high IQ are very similar or look very similar. High energy, intense passions, talking a lot, quick thinking, emotional intensity, curiosity, impulsivity, all these things look the same. But the reasons for these behaviors is very different. When you have a high IQ, it's because you're processing things a lot faster. When you have ADHD, you're dealing with a dopamine deficit, and so that affects all the different executive functions that you have. And there is something way less confusing than whether you have a high IQ or ADHD. It's just pressing the subscribe button if you're enjoying the content. And here's something really interesting that I found. In 2017, they did a study and they found out that adults with ADHD and a higher IQ show fewer visible executive function problems than those with ADHD and an average IQ, meaning a high intelligence can actually mask ADHD. And this is also interesting. In another study in 2024, they said higher IQ predicts later ADHD diagnosis. People with a high IQ tend to get diagnosed years later, sometimes decades later, because they hide their symptoms so well. And so if you're wondering why they get diagnosed so late, why didn't I find out this sooner? The research backs it up that it is pretty normal for you to get diagnosed later if you have a high IQ. And if you have ADHD and a high IQ, it can be a really powerful mix. You can get good things from both, but you're also dealing with the ADHD roller coaster of dopamine that you have to deal with, and that can be unpredictable. And now there are some good things. Let's talk about them. Starting with high IQ, you might love problem solving. You probably have strong critical thinking skills. You be creative, imaginative, maybe have deep empathy for other people. You are really just able to focus intently on what you're interested in. And with ADHD, you're probably creative. You probably love to generate a whole bunch of ideas just by brainstorming, and it's really fast, energetic, and you might be great in a crisis because of how you think. I know some people with ADHD love to be first responders because it's always changing, always moving. You can also hyper focus on your interests, which can be a really good thing. And here's some of the bad things you might have to deal with. Starting with a high IQ, you might just get bored easily. You might deal with perfectionism because everything has to be perfect before you move on to the next thing. You might get frustrated when you're misunderstood. You might have really intense emotions and really high sensitivity because of everything you've been throughout your life. And with ADHD, you might have trouble focusing. You might forget things a lot. You might not have great time management skills to get to where you want to get to on time. You might start something and never finish it, or not even get motivated to start the thing in the first place. And you might make really impulsive decisions. Matter of fact, one of the things that you can do to help with the impulsivity is take the 24-hour rule. If you have ADHD, that means if you're trying to make a big decision, you take 24 hours before making that decision. And when you have a high IQ and ADHD, you might look capable at what you're doing, but you might struggle with the most basic of tasks. You might have high insight, but low execution, not ever getting through to what you needed to do. You might be fast thinking and everything, but then you might struggle to actually start. Or you might just get burnt out from masking ADHD to high IQ and vice versa. And let's talk about some real life differences between ADHD and high IQ. When you have a high IQ, you might have consistent performance, structured thinking, and strong follow through. When you have ADHD by itself, you might have inconsistent performance, time blindness, and avoiding mentally challenging or difficult tasks. And when you have a high IQ and ADHD, you might do things like solve a huge problem in seconds and you're all completely done. But you might also forget to send a basic email to someone. You can learn about a topic instantly. You've got it all just in an instant, a few seconds. And you might also avoid a 5-minute task because it's boring and you just put it off to the side for weeks at a time. And look, this combination does not cancel out ADHD. It just makes it harder for anyone to notice that you might have ADHD. And let's talk about what each brain needs: high IQ brain and ADHD brain. First, high IQ. You want things that challenge you. You want things that stimulate your mind. You want things that are interesting problems to solve and complexity. With ADHD brain, you want structure, visual cues, dopamine triggers, timers, small steps, anything that's going to help you with the challenges of ADHD. And if you have both, you're going to need a mix of structure and stimulation. You're going to need systems that reduce friction, keep things visible, and then a match for your passion-driven focus so that you can accomplish whatever you need to accomplish. And this is really important. You're not alone in trying to figure this out. Even though you might be confused about high IQ, ADHD, if you have both, there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with this, and a lot of people that are looking from the outside to the inside trying to figure out as well too. So you are not alone in dealing with this. And here's something else. If you want to learn more about ADHD, I do have a video that's about to come up. Just click on that video and watch that video to learn more about ADHD.